I had a conversation with Nir Ayal, and he said we're discomfort-avoiding creatures. And he said whenever you find yourself procrastinating, it's basically because there's discomfort associated with the task at hand.
Yeah.
So I had a conversation with someone very close to me recently, actually yesterday. And in our conversation, they've been meaning to do this online project for a long, long time, for 2 years now. And they've just done everything but this online project. And when we kind of deconstructed it, as you said, it was really because they don't feel competent in several of the individual pieces. So they're just like researching themselves to death and taking no action.
Absolutely. This is one of the biggest barriers to learning as an adult. Adult learners hate to feel stupid. We hate to feel over our head, that we don't know what we're doing, that we're going to look bad in front of others, that there's some idealized skill level that would represent success, and your early attempts look nothing like that. There was an interesting study that was done about changes in artistic ability and inclination over the human lifespan. And so when you ask a bunch of young children, are you an artist? Every one of them answers yes. Yeah, I create art. That's what I do. And there's a certain threshold, and it usually happens around like the middle grades, junior high-ish, where people will start to say like, no, it's not something that I do. And there's a certain amount of self-consciousness that develops in the process of becoming an adult, where you can start to recognize that the difference between what you can do and what you want to do can be somewhat extreme.
Yeah.
And that self-consciousness can be an active barrier to getting started in the first place.
It's all by comparison as well, isn't it? Really, because...
Yeah, like comparison with other people, and then also comparison with ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So with other people, like early stages of skill acquisition, if you're comparing yourself to the masters in hours 1, 2, and 3, you are not doing yourself any favors at all. And then even like, I think that's a little bit easier to avoid because I have only golfed a couple times in my life. Comparing myself to Tiger Woods doesn't feel like an even like conceptually appropriate thing for me to do. That's not difficult. The harder thing is comparing yourself to the other person who has not golfed very much, but somehow hit a shot straight or whatever. Or like, it feels like this shouldn't be so hard for me. Why is this so hard for me? And then like the self-recrimination feedback loop starts. And so I talk about in the first 20 hours, I call this the frustration barrier. And so generally speaking, rough rule of thumb, hours 1 to 10 are brutal, emotionally speaking. And so that's the period of time where you're really frustrated. Things make very little sense. You're like, I don't know what a key is, let alone a key change. What's a beat per minute? And like, all of those self-consciousness circuits are fully online, fully firing, and no matter how much you want something, those first few hours can be pretty brutal.
It's where most people quit as well, I guess.
Yeah, and that's why. Like it's an emotional management problem. And so the way to get around that, also the way to get out of research mode and into doing mode, and this is where the title, The First 20 Hours, comes from. The first 20 hours refers to a pre-commitment, which is a very useful piece of behavioral psychology that says that if you pre-commit to taking a certain action, either a certain amount of times or within a certain period of time, either to yourselves or ideally to other people, you're far more likely to actually follow through on the doing of the thing. And so what I found is that in learning a new skill, making a pre-commitment that no matter what, I'm going to spend 20 hours doing this thing. I might be terrible. This might be really uncomfortable. I might hate it. I might never do this again. But no matter what, I care about this thing that I want to learn enough that I'm going to invest at least 20 hours of my life figuring out if this is good, if this works for me, if this is beneficial.
You said something there which I think is key, which is you said, this matters to me enough.
Yes.
And that feels like it's a prerequisite, something that we really need to be clear on before we even start.
Yeah.
Because without that part, you refer to it in your 10 major principles of rapid skill acquisition as choosing a lovable project.
Exactly. Yeah.
Why does that matter?
Well, it's because we're busy. It's because we don't have infinite time, energy, and attention to do all the things that might look, feel, sound fun or interesting to us. And so there needs to be at least some minimum threshold of, this is important to me to make some trade-offs in other areas of my life, or to not watch that movie, or not relax on social media this night. I'm going to carve out some time in my day and actually make this a priority to sit down and do the work. And generally speaking, I found that for myself, if I'm not willing to make the pre-commitment to put at least 20 hours into it, that's a pretty good indication that it is not important enough for me to invest time and energy in the first place.
We've been through most of them there. So number 1 is choose a lovable project. Number 2 is focus your energy on one skill at a time. We said that one. Number 3 is define your target performance level. We talked about that as well. Number 4 is deconstruct the skill and sub-skills. Number 5 is obtain critical tools, which I guess is the tools you need to do the practice, right?
Yeah, that's kind of a subset of removing barriers to practice.
Okay.
And so the classic example here is so many people in the world want to learn how to play the guitar. And so the thing to not do is buy a guitar and leave it in the case and put it in a closet upstairs far away, because that just requires too much time, energy, thought, attention of like remembering where it is, going upstairs, grabbing the guitar, getting it out of the case, getting all ready. The best thing that you can do is just make it really, really easy. Remove all the friction from it. Get a little stand, put it right next to your living room chair or couch where it's a visible insight. All you need to do is reach over, grab it, and start. It just makes it more likely you're actually going to sit down and do the work.
I think we've covered all 10 there. The last one is emphasize quantity and speed.
Yes.
What does that mean?
So early on in the process, there's a tendency to like want to do it perfectly sooner versus doing it imperfectly more is actually more beneficial. And so in this case, for your DJing, mixing a lot of songs one to the other is going to teach you a lot more than just hyper-focusing on one song A into song B, and I'm going to work until this is perfect. You're just not going to learn as much. It's the variety, the exploration, and the variety of circumstances will teach you more about what it looks and feels and sounds like than trying to get too perfect on one specific thing too quickly. So like going back to the playing guitar thing, like get a bunch of tabs and learn how to play a whole bunch of different songs not super well, because it's the commonalities that you learn between the different experiences. Those are the things that really tune you into what's really important.
The foundations of the art.
Exactly. Like, what's a chord? So for guitar, what's a chord? How do you change from one chord to another? Tracking beats, tempo, things like that. Like, those are the foundational skills that apply across pieces of music. And so if you practice those first across a wide variety of things, that's just optimizing that early practice around things that will stick, that you'll use a lot.
Is there anything about the subject of learning and the first 20 hours that we've not discussed that you think is especially important to close off on? If someone is really that they want to learn a new skill and we're thinking about where they are and where they want to get to, is there anything else that you think they need to know that we haven't covered?
I think that this dovetails a little bit with our conversation around personal MBA. Spend more of your time doing weird, cool things. Like having that exploration budget of really just like, the further afield you go, the more things you discover, you'll find some surprising commonalities that can be very interesting and very cool. We were talking about Apple earlier. One of the primary design inspirations for the Apple computing system was Steve Jobs taking a random calligraphy class in college. And it's not something that you would put together in some sort of obvious way, but it was an important enough influence of being able to take some part of life and like apply it in a different way, in a different context to another thing that unlocked a lot of value for a lot of people. And so for me, like in the larger sense, I think it's just really valuable to take a step back and think about like, what might I want to experience or what might I want to learn how to do at some point in my life? Just make a list. It can be, I think self-editing here is not the way to go. Just like make a list of all the things that appeal to you for whatever reason. And then the benefit of an approach like the first 20 hours is it gives you a way to make actually going about doing that thing look and feel far more approachable than it otherwise might.